Historic earthquakes that caught the East Coast off guard. When most people think of earthquakes in the United States, their minds go to California and the West Coast, where the San Andreas Fault looms large. However, the East Coast has experienced its fair share of surprising and powerful earthquakes. Unlike their West Coast counterparts, East Coast quakes tend to travel farther due to the region's older, more solid bedrock, catching residents off guard. Here are some of the most notable earthquakes that shook the East Coast unexpectedly. 1. The 1755 Cape Ann Earthquake, New England's wake-up call. On November 18, 1755, a powerful earthquake estimated to be around magnitude 6.0 struck off the coast of Cape Ann, Massachusetts. This was one of the first major recorded earthquakes in the American colonies. The quake caused extensive damage to buildings in Boston, including cracked chimneys, toppled walls, and reports of ground shaking as far away as New York City and Halifax, Nova Scotia. With no real seismic knowledge at the time, many colonists believed it was a sign of divine intervention. 2. The 1811-1812 New Madrid Earthquakes. Though centered in Missouri, the series of massive New Madrid earthquakes between December 1811 and February 1812 sent shockwaves across the entire eastern U.S. The largest quakes, estimated between magnitudes 7.5 and 8.0, reportedly rang church bells in Boston and Washington, D.C. The shaking reversed the course of the Mississippi River temporarily and caused widespread panic in major East Coast cities, where residents were completely unprepared for seismic activity. 3. The 1886 Charleston Earthquake. The South's most devastating quake. One of the most destructive earthquakes in U.S. history struck Charleston, South Carolina, on August 31, 1886. With a magnitude estimated at 7.0, this quake leveled much of the city, destroying thousands of buildings and killing at least 60 people. The earthquake was felt as far away as Chicago and New York City, with reports of damage even in Ohio. Charleston was caught entirely off guard, and the event remains the most significant seismic disaster in the southeastern U.S. The 1925 Charlevoix-Kamouraska Earthquake. A Canadian quake shakes the U.S. On February 28, 1925, a magnitude 6.2 earthquake struck Quebec's Charlevoix-Kamouraska region, sending tremors throughout the northeastern United States. Residents in New York, Boston, and Philadelphia felt the shaking, which damaged chimneys and caused alarm in buildings with no earthquake preparedness. This quake reinforced the fact that seismic activity in Canada could also impact American cities, a reality often overlooked even today. 5. The 2011 Virginia Earthquake, a modern-day surprise. On August 23, 2011, a magnitude 5.8 earthquake struck near Mineral, Virginia, shaking buildings from Georgia to Canada. The quake was one of the strongest in the eastern U.S. in over a century and was widely felt, particularly in Washington, D.C., where the Washington Monument and National Cathedral sustained damage. Many East Coast residents had never experienced an earthquake before, leading to widespread confusion, evacuations, and overloaded phone networks. Why East Coast earthquakes are so shocking. Unlike the West Coast, where earthquakes are frequent and expected, the East Coast experiences seismic events much less often. The region's ancient bedrock allows shock waves to travel hundreds of miles, making even moderate earthquakes feel more intense over large areas. Additionally, East Coast infrastructure is generally not built with earthquake resilience in mind, making damage more likely when a quake does strike. While earthquakes may not be a daily concern for East Coast residents, history has shown that they can and do happen, often with surprising intensity. The 2011 Virginia earthquake served as a wake-up call that seismic activity in the region is not just a historical footnote. As geologists continue to study East Coast fault lines, it's clear that being prepared, even in places where earthquakes are rare, is always a wise choice. Have you ever felt an earthquake on the East Coast? Share your experiences in the comments.